A girl stood in the rain, silent. Her sunglasses hid her eyes. Her suitcase stayed dry while everything around her was soaked. When the driver opened the door, she disappeared. Minutes later, a passenger screamed, a co-driver snapped, and the bus slammed into a concrete divider. They thought it was just another late shift, but that night on Route 19 became one of Japan's most whispered horror stories. Let's uncover the haunting of the girl no one stopped for on Uncle Hollow NX today. Sugimura Daisuke didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in fuel economy, tire pressure, and the daily bonuses he could hit if he completed 4 round trips between the city and the mountain resort town. That's all that mattered. It was early spring and the mountains were still cold at night. Rain streaked the windshield of the bus as he started his final run of the day. The roads were slick, the fog rolled low, and his co-driver Hiroshi was already dozing off beside him. But Daisuke was focused. Just one more trip and he'd secure enough extra pay this week to cover his daughter's school uniform and a second-hand bicycle she'd been eyeing. The route was familiar: tight curves, stretches of forest, sleepy roadside towns. He could drive it with his eyes closed. But tonight, something was different. The cabin felt colder than usual. The headlights didn't cut through the mist as cleanly as they used to. And the silence inside the bus felt thick, like something was waiting. Still, Daisuke shook it off. He glanced at his rearview mirror, adjusted the collar of his jacket, and muttered, "Last one for the day, let's make it count." But a few miles ahead, as the rain picked up and the forest swallowed the road, he would make a stop that wasn't on the schedule. A girl was waiting, and from that moment, nothing on Route 19 would ever be the same again. The rain was heavier now, almost rhythmic as it hit the roof of the bus like a heartbeat. The forest thickened on both sides, tree trunks aslick with moss and darkness. Daisuke slowed slightly. These mountain curves could be treacherous when wet. Hiroshi stirred in his seat, still half asleep, mumbling something incoherent. That's when Daisuke saw her, a figure standing just off the shoulder, near a curve where no one should be. She was illuminated for a second in the high beams, a young woman, mid-20s maybe, dressed in a wool sweater, long skirt, and knee-high boots. One hand clutched the handle of a canvas suitcase. The other was at his side. Her face was obscured by oversized black sunglasses even in the middle of the night. Rain poured around her, but she looked dry. There were no bus stops here, no vending machines, no houses, just her, alone. Reflexively, Daisuke eased onto the shoulder and hit the air brake. The familiar hiss filled the silence. He leaned forward, squinting through the wipers. "Looks like a traveler. Lost?" he muttered. He hit the door release. The hydraulic hiss opened the bus's folding door. She didn't move. He waited, engine idling, water streaming down the windshield. A full 5 seconds passed. 10. Still, she stood motionless. No flinch, no eye contact, no reaction at all. "Ma'am," Daisuke called, this time louder. Nothing. Hiroshi leaned forward, now fully awake, eyes wide. "You opened the door?" he whispered. "She was right there," Daisuke replied. "Right there, didn't you see her?" But Hiroshi shook his head. The seat across from the door was empty. There was no shadow, no shape, no silhouette in the rain anymore. Just wet road and forest. Daisuke leaned forward, trying to make sense of it. The woman had vanished, not walked away, not run, just gone. A chill ran down his spine. "Maybe she slipped into the trees," he offered weakly. "No one moves that fast," he said. "You sure she was ever there?" Daisuke didn't answer. He tapped the door button again. The doors hissed shut. He checked the rearview mirror instinctively. Clear. But his knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he pulled back onto the road. "Probably just tired," Seeing things?" Behind him, a single drop of water slid down the last row's window from the inside.
15 minutes passed since the girl in the rain. Daisuke didn't speak. Hiroshi didn't ask. The bus rolled on in silence, windshield wipers slicing through the mist, their rhythmic squeak the only constant sound. They were nearing a small intersection where the highway met a service road. A traffic light hovered above, glowing red like a warning. Daisuke slowed to a gentle stop, watching the countdown tick from 50 seconds. It gave him a rare moment to breathe, to sip from the lukewarm coffee in his thermos. Hiroshi leaned against the window, staring out into the dark. And then, heavy footsteps. Someone sprinted up the aisle. Daisuke glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a blur of movement. A teenage boy, no more than 17, charging forward. "What the—" he began, but didn't finish. Smack! The sound was deafening. The boy's hand slammed across Daisuke's face, snapping his head sideways. The thermos dropped and rolled across the floor. "You left me there!" the boy screamed, voice hoarse and ragged. "You saw me! You saw me and left me!" His fists balled. He lunged again, but Hiroshi leapt up and pinned him against a seat. "Kid, hey, stop it!" Hiroshi yelled, holding the teen by his jacket. A woman came running up the aisle, the boy's mother, eyes wide with terror. "Yuki, stop it! That's enough!" she cried, grabbing her son's arm. He thrashed for a second longer, then collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Passengers behind them were standing now, murmuring, confused. Daisuke rubbed his jaw, still in shock. What the hell was that? The boy was trembling, eyes wide and unfocused. His lips moved, but no words came out. "Yuki," his mother whispered. "What happened?" He blinked. I don't know. I was sitting, and then I was standing. Why is everyone looking at me?" "You don't remember running up here?" Hiroshi asked, his voice tight. "You remember running up where?" Hiroshi turned to Daisuke. "That wasn't normal." "No kidding." The light turned green. Horns blared from a car behind them. Daisuke hit the gas, slowly pulling the bus forward, hands still shaking. For a moment, he thought about the girl in the rain, the one he never picked up. But that didn't make sense, did it? The bus pressed forward, now leaving the lights of the small intersection. Most passengers had settled back into their seats, murmurs fading into tired silence. Only Hiroshi and Daisuke remained tense, their bodies stiff with adrenaline and confusion. The road narrowed again, flanked by steep slopes and thick forest. Daisuke focused on the turns ahead, but every so often he glanced at Hiroshi. The co-driver was unusually quiet. "Hiroshi," Daisuke said under his breath. "You okay?" Hiroshi didn't answer. He was staring at the road with wide, glassy eyes. His fingers twitched on his lap. Then he whispered, "She's still here." "What?" "She's watching." Before Daisuke could react, Hiroshi lunged, not at him, but at the wheel. "Hey, hey!" Hiroshi's right hand grabbed the top of the wheel, yanking it hard to the left. At the same time, his shoulders slammed into Daisuke, forcing the steering column to jerk violently. The bus veered sideways, tires screeching, passengers screaming. Daisuke fought to regain control, jamming the brake and pulling against Hiroshi's grip. A loud metallic crunch echoed through the forest as the bus slammed into a concrete divider, front bumper scraping along the edge before jolting to a full stop. The bus rocked slightly before settling. Gasps filled the cabin. Someone in the back cried. A child was sobbing into their mother's coat. Bags had spilled. A plastic bottle rolled to the front. Daisuke shoved Hiroshi back into his seat, panting. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Hiroshi blinked, confused, breathing heavily. I don't remember. He said we didn't stop, that we didn't let her in." His voice trembled, but it wasn't just fear.
It was as if he had heard those words not in his mind, but in his ears. Passengers began demanding answers. Daisuke stood, assuring everyone no one was hurt, that it was just a loss of control, but he didn't believe it himself. He looked back at Hiroshi, still pale, still shaking. And then he remembered the rearview mirror. He looked up. Nothing.
But for the first time in his life, Daisuke unclipped the mirror and turned it to face the floor. Whatever had just tried to take over the wheel, he didn't want to see it coming. Once the bus had stopped shaking, Daisuke opened the door and stepped out into the cold night air. Rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the fog was thicker now, creeping along the roadside like smoke. The forest on either side of the road loomed heavy and silent. He crouched down to check the front of the bus. The bumper was scraped and dented, but still intact. No fluid leaks, no cracked lights. They'd gotten lucky. Then he heard a hiss from the back. Hurrying to the rear tires, he saw it. One of the rear wheels was deflating. Air escaping with a soft but constant hiss. A few seconds later, he heard the same sound again, on the opposite side. "What now?" he muttered, running to the other side. The second rear tire was going flat. Not fast, but steady. Unnatural. Hiroshi stepped out behind him, eyes still glazed. More bad luck? Daisuke didn't answer. He crouched again, bringing his flashlight closer to the rubber. And that's when he saw it. On both tires, on the layers of dirt and road dust, were tiny handprints. Not smudges, not random marks. Perfect, child-sized handprints. Too small for any adult. 5 fingers, pressed flat, as if someone had crawled over the tires with soaked hands. "Do you see this?" he asked Hiroshi, his voice low and cracking. Hiroshi leaned in, and his face went pale. "That's not funny. I didn't do this." "No," Hiroshi whispered, "but someone did." Just then, a loud pop echoed from the front of the bus. They both jumped. Daisuke sprinted forward. One of the front tires was now hissing, visibly deflating. And seconds later, the fourth tire joined it. All 4 tires, flat, almost simultaneously. No nails, no road debris, just 4 deflating tires and 2 sets of handprints. They stood in silence. Neither spoke, but both were thinking the same thing. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was personal. The passengers had all been evacuated from the bus, most huddled under the shelter of nearby trees. Others paced nervously, checking their phones for signal. Daisuke sat alone in the driver's seat, his hands clenched around a disposable heat pack, trying to keep them from shaking. Hiroshi was outside, trying to get a signal for a tow truck. The forest was dead quiet again, save for the ticking of the cooling engine and the occasional rustle of wind through the branches. Daisuke exhaled slowly and glanced toward the windshield. The fog had crept up the glass, leaving only a small clear patch from the defroster. Rain had tapped faintly above. He sighed, leaned back, and froze. In the rearview mirror, turned back up almost instinctively, he saw her. Last row, center seat. The girl. The same girl from the rain. Same sweater, same long skirt, same sunglasses. Only now, she wasn't standing on the road. She was sitting. Head tilted slightly to the side, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, her body perfectly still. He blinked. She didn't. His throat tightened. He wanted to look back, to turn around and confirm, but something inside him screamed, "Don't!" Instead, he stared into the mirror, heart pounding. She raised one hand. Just a little wave. Then she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even malicious. It was empty. A smile that didn't reach the eyes. He gasped, spun in his seat. The row was empty.
No wet seat, no footprints, no suitcase, nothing. But as he turned back toward the wheel, he noticed it. The mirror was fogged from the inside. One perfect finger swipe had cleared a line across it, like someone watching had wiped the glass. And just beneath it, drawn in the condensation, was a message. "You saw me." By the time the tow truck operator finally answered Hiroshi's call, it was already past 3 a.m. The dispatcher said it would take over an hour for anyone to reach them. Daisuke didn't argue. He didn't care about schedules anymore. Something deeper had shifted inside him that he couldn't explain to a boss or a mechanic.
He stepped out of the bus, looked down the winding road disappearing into fog, and felt a knot tighten in his chest. That feeling, like someone was still waiting. "I need incense," he muttered. Hiroshi blinked. "What?" "Incense. A light. Anything. There's an old house down that way. We passed it last week. I think it had a gate lantern." Without waiting for agreement, Daisuke grabbed a pocket flashlight and started walking. Hiroshi followed. They reached the wooden gate of a small countryside home. The lights were off, but a flickering bulb glowed over the entrance. Daisuke knocked gently. After a few long moments, a frail old woman opened the door. She looked at them silently. Two soaked men in uniforms, haunted faces lit by dim yellow light. "Please," Daisuke said, bowing, we need incense. Just one stick, to pay respect." She didn't ask why. She simply nodded and disappeared inside. A moment later, she returned with 3 sticks of incense and a matchbook. They thanked her deeply. Then they walked a few steps down the road away from the house. There, near a bend in the road, Daisuke stopped. "This is where I saw her." He knelt by the guardrail, struck a match, and lit the incense. Smoke curled upward, disappearing into the dark like breath into fog. He bowed once, then whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have stopped. I saw you. I knew you were there." The smoke twisted unnaturally, coiling around the sticks like fingers. Hiroshi lit his, hands trembling. "We didn't mean to ignore you. Please, let it end here." They stood for a long time watching the incense burn. And just as the last ember faded out, a soft gust of wind passed over them. It wasn't cold. It wasn't threatening. It just felt like something had left. The next morning, after the bus was towed and the passengers were safely rerouted, Daisuke and Hiroshi sat inside the service station's break room, nursing hot coffee that neither of them drank. Neither man spoke for a long time. Finally, Daisuke broke the silence. She wasn't just some spirit. She was angry. She was waiting. Hiroshi nodded slowly, waiting for us to stop. Later that day, Daisuke made a call to an old acquaintance, Kawamura-san, a retired dispatcher who'd worked the mountain routes for nearly 40 years. He trusted Kawamura to be discreet. "There's something strange about that stretch of road. Something old." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Kawamura sighed. "I'm not the first to say that." He paused, then spoke quietly. 10 years ago, a girl boarded a bus in town, heading up to the mountain resort. She paid only part of the fare, said she'd pay the rest once she met her friend. The driver made her get off halfway, near that forest curve. It was late, cold. Daisuke's stomach dropped. They found her 2 days later.
She'd tried to walk through the forest. Hypothermia. Her ID showed she was a university student. No family came to claim the body. No one knew much about her. No shrine? None. Just a name on a forgotten police report. Daisuke gripped the phone. What was her name? I don't remember, but I remember what she was wearing. It was in the report. A cream-colored wool sweater, long gray skirt, canvas suitcase. Daisuke's breath caught. That was her. The girl I didn't pick up. The girl in the mirror. The girl who waved. For 10 years, she had been waiting in silence. And now, after the smoke, the apology, the night of chaos, maybe she'd finally been heard. Daisuke never drove the mountain route again. He didn't quit the company, not right away, but he asked for a city line, daytime only. No night shifts, no forest curves, no fog, no mirrors. But some habits linger. To this day, on the inside of his windshield, just above the rearview mirror, hangs a thin strip of white cloth, tied in a simple knot. No one ever asks about it. Most passengers think it's a charm or a lucky token. They don't know that every time Daisuke drives past the turnoff to that mountain road, he touches the cloth once, briefly, with his right hand.
He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. It's a gesture, a silent apology, a promise to never ignore a hand raised in the rain again. Years later, newer drivers joined the company, young, ambitious, skeptical. One of them, laughing, once asked Daisuke, "Hey, is that the ghost road? That's just an old story, right?" Daisuke didn't laugh. He just answered, "Some roads don't forget, and some passengers don't forgive." And then he looked into the mirror, not for her, not anymore, but just to make sure she wasn't waiting for someone else. Sometimes the scariest ghosts aren't the ones we see, but the ones we choose not to. This story isn't just about a supernatural encounter. It's about guilt, indifference, and the cost of looking away. Daisuke didn't harm anyone. He didn't abandon her intentionally, but in a moment of fatigue, of pressure, he chose to keep driving. How many times in our lives do we do the same? Ignore someone in need, avoid discomfort, justify a small decision that leaves someone else behind. The tragedy isn't only that a girl died in the cold, it's that no one remembered, no shrine, no family, no name, just a forgotten police report and a ghost still waiting for a simple acknowledgement. This story reminds us, even the smallest kindness or the smallest neglect can echo for years, maybe not as ghosts, but as memories, regrets, scars, and perhaps a strip of white cloth on a windshield. If this story gave you chills, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share with someone who needs a reminder that some mistakes don't haunt us until much later. Question for you. Have you ever ignored someone you shouldn't have? Or passed up a moment that you still regret? Tell us in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find closure. And if you're new here, subscribe to Uncle Hollow NX, because tomorrow's video might just be the one you needed to hear.